First of all, are you in the right class? Advanced Political Economy? Yes?
Yeah.
All right. So, we'll cover some latecomers in a moment. Welcome to the class. Welcome to. Are you mostly first year students? No. Who's a Ikaise? Oh, okay. Who are foreign students? Well, not so many. Okay. We have about 40 students. 45. It's very hard for me to know what the size of the class is because I don't get a list of students before I start. But this is a good number. Last year I had 80, and then it shrank to about 40. So I hope 40, all of you stay. All right, so this is going to be a class in English. I'll try and speak slowly and clearly, and I will test whether, or not test, but ask whether you are following what I am saying. My name is Hijino. I have many first names. I'm half Swedish, half Japanese, and in Sweden they tend to give the grandfather's name, so I have Victor and them. You can call me Hijino. I am a political scientist, and I have been researching Japanese politics, mainly modern Japanese politics, focusing on local government, political parties, and political organizations. But in this class, I'll be teaching more in terms of political economy, kind of historical perspective on Japan's post-war. Okay? And this class, you don't have to have any prior knowledge about Japan's post-war. If you're Japanese, probably you know a little bit about Japan's post-war. And there's no prior requirement in terms of having taken a history class before, or come in, or having taken social science classes before. It's very useful if you have, but there's no requirement. It says probably on the syllabus. In terms of expectations of English, I'll be speaking like this. You'll be reading maybe 20, 30 pages of academic English, not technical, but rigorous English every week, 20 to 30 pages, maybe a bit more, from a textbook, and then later I'll give you articles. So that's the idea. And for those of you who are wondering whether you want to stay or not, in terms of the evaluation of this class, I just put this out in the beginning. I will be asking you to take some pop quizzes to make sure that you attend. Usually the pop quizzes, you know what a pop quiz is? Yeah, Japanese students, pop quiz? You know? Yes? No? What is a pop quiz? Who's heard of pop quiz? Okay, good. Pop. It's unannounced. So, 日本語なんていうんですかね。unexpected. So, 予期せぬ。試験じゃないけど、ミニクイズ。We'll do that, so you understand. I speak Japanese, but we'll do this class in English. If you can't understand or if you have problems, and you really need to ask me something, even in class, you can ask me in Japanese. And I will respond in English, or I will translate for the rest of the class. By the way, who doesn't speak Japanese in here? Okay, that's fine. Who doesn't speak English here? Well, everybody has different levels. So what I was saying, pop quizzes. So when the class size is small, I don't do pop quizzes because I know who comes. But since there are many of you, and later in the semester, people tend to avoid or not come to classes, and I don't take, I should say, attendance. Kids go through university students, so I don't really care whether you come or not. But I think it's important that you do come in terms of comprehension and getting exposure to lecture. Okay, so I will do 3 or 4 pop quizzes, which counts for about 30% of your grade, and then you'll have a final term paper, which will be an English essay, okay, or a critical essay. So you make an argument. I'll ask you a question. You can choose from out of 5 or 10 questions, and then just answer in 2,000 words in English, constructing an argument. Okay, we'll explain that a bit later in the semester, and that paper is due at the end of the term. Okay, so 30%, 70%. There's no exam. Clear? So, I mean, the essay is very big, part of the grade, so we have to prepare and have to pretty good job. Most students who take my class previous years have passed, but I have failed people because evidently they have not read the text or have followed my lectures or have just submitted the paper without attending at all, and I can usually tell. So it's not an easy credit if you're thinking this is an easy credit. But if you come and you study and you try and you ask me questions, if you don't follow, there should be no problem. It's an introductory political economy. Okay? Is everybody following what I am saying? Please raise your hand if you don't understand everything or have difficulty. It's fine. Okay? Shall I speak? Am I speaking too quickly? Raise your hand. Well, fine. Just follow along. Now, usually I will give a lecture about 60 minutes or 70 minutes, and then the rest of the class I will open it up for questions, okay, and discussion. I think 40 people, we can do discussion a little bit. It's important just not to take lectures and just sit there and listen. I understand there's some scientific study saying that people's concentration spans, attention spans, they can actually listen to somebody speak. There's a cycle of about 10, 15 minutes. The first 2-3 minutes, everybody's paying very close attention. And then if the person is interesting, keep on listening. And then there's a peak around 7 or 8 minutes. That's where you want to hit the students with good information or what you want them to remember, and then it slows down. So if you have a 90-minute class, what does that mean? After 15 minutes, people aren't really listening. I'm exaggerating, but 90 minutes, me talking is very boring and probably you'll fall asleep. So I'll try and break it up. Even during the lectures, open it up for questions. Okay? So anytime you want to ask a question, raise your hand. And don't be afraid to raise your hand. I know Japanese public education, I understand it doesn't really encourage that so much. It's a lot of lectures. And in other classes, at Kyodai maybe it's a lot of just lecture, taking notes. But I think part of the reason for this kind of class, the E-Kamoku, the English E1 to 3, is for you to experience English and also to use English, not just to listen and read. So even if you have bad pronunciation or bad grammar, just ask. Be fearless. Okay? Is that clear? So 14 lectures and 1 feedback session. And I'll get into what we're going to talk about. Okay, so post-war. So the title of this is Political Economy, but in the brackets post-war. That's important because it's not just any period. We're focusing from a historical perspective, taking a chunk from Japan's history, the most recent. So when is the post-war from in Japan? When does the post-war period start? Good, okay. But that's the general understanding. Maybe some people in Kyoto, the joke is that the post-war is after, when is that? Oni no Ran, so 1270 something. The last big war, if you ask a real Kyoto person, is not 1930 to 45, but from the 1250. So post-war for some Kyoto people, it's a bit of a joke. Anyhow, so 1945 up to 2015, so it's about 2017, that's about 70 years. One could take, with history, one can take, it's kind of arbitrary periodization. Not quite arbitrary, but you can say post-Olympics Japan, you can say post-oil shock Japan, you can say post-bubble, right? So the lost decades, which we'll talk about, just from 1990 to 2000. Even today, some people say Japan is in the Ushinareta 10年, 20年. So decades. Okay, so there's different kinds of periodization, but here in this class we'll talk mainly from 45. And we'll of course discuss a little bit before 45, but mainly starting from 45 and up to today. And we'll talk about the political economy, so the relationship between politics and economics. We won't go into such technical or theoretical aspects of all kinds of advanced theories and comparative theories and arguments about political economy. We'll touch a little bit about that, but mainly looking at Japan and trying to understand why Japan is the way it is now by going back to 1945 and all the historical momentum and institutions and legacies that continue to this day. Okay? That's my little sort of short makura. And then we'll go into the slides. Everyone can see the slides? Yes? No? Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Good. You'll stay awake if you just raise your voice or raise your hands. Or just sit there and listen. Okay, 70 plus years later, where are we? That is 70 years after 1945, August 15th. Where are we? Has the post-war ended? Some people say yes, some people say no. In 1956, when Japan joined the UN, became a member of the UN, and then there was this beginning of this Japan's economic miracle. And Japan grew very rapidly for about 20 years. 8, 10, 12% GDP growth per year. Hard to imagine today. There was a phrase which a government official, or actually it was a government publication, it said that もはや戦後ではない. It's no longer the post-war in 1956. That's quite early to say after 10 years from the war. But after that, there's been a lot of talk about Sengo regime. Recent prime minister or current prime minister has said we need to get out of the post-war regime. So obviously the post-war hasn't ended for him or for the elite people. Becoming a normal country, retaking Japan from the post-war period. What exactly was he talking about? All these things. So post-war for some would argue hasn't ended. Some would say it's ended. What does it mean to end? All sorts of questions arise. It's not so much. Too much, but a lot of other countries outside of Japan are concerned about Japan returning to pre-war situation, whatever that means. Okay, so there's a lot of question about post-war, pre-war. Where are we after 70 years? Well, where's the picture? That's the problem. I had a very nice picture of Prime Minister Abe saying, but it's not there. So you can imagine Prime Minister Abe poster saying, which means take back Japan. Some technical problem. But what was lost in the post-war period? What was gained? What is he talking about? All these things one can question by studying or understand a bit better by studying the whole development of post-war political economy in Japan. Okay. How would you explain Japan's post-war period? This is more of an analytical question, more so not just empirical. That is, not just what happened, but how should we explain? What sort of things should we do to try and explain post-war? If you meet somebody who doesn't know anything about Japan, very little, what would you explain in terms of what happened in post-war? Anybody? Oh, the first thing you will say if somebody says, what happened to Japan after 1945? Yes?
Democratization and unmilitarization.
The what?
Democratization.
Good.
And unmilitarization.
Demilitarization. Very good. Yeah. Democratization and demilitarization. Very, very good. So that's often said. Then you can say, what do you mean by democratize? What kind of democracy did it become? Some people will say, well, you look at Japan, this is one political party who's been in power for about 90% of the time, right? For 70 years, over 70 years, maybe only 3 years. Actually, well, there was 1945 to 55. Well, from 55 to 60 years, anyway, LDP, Jimito has been in power all the time. What kind of democracy is that? Has it really democratized? Demilitarization, yes. Japan pre-war was a very militarized state. The military had a lot of influence, had a lot of budget, and after the post-war period, they have been shrunk. The constitution was put in place, right? All these sort of things. That's a very good place to start. What else would you explain to a person who knows nothing about Japan? Yeah?
Like occupation?
There was an occupation, yes. And occupation is actually one of the causes of demilitarization. Democratization. Anybody else? Think more long span. If you have to explain up to today. So many things, right? How about the economy? What happened to Japan's economy? What happens to Japan's relationship with the rest of the world? What happened to the Japanese population? What happened to people's lifestyles? Totally changed. So there's many, many things to think about. Oh, all right. What happened here? Why is this picture not showing? It's really annoying. It works in my office. Anyhow, what questions to ask? What areas to consider? What comparisons to be made? There's so much going on in history, right? Political developments, economic developments, technological developments, cultural, social, demographic. What should we focus on? It's rather complicated. So when you look at social systems, if you want to be quite scientific about it, social phenomena, it's very difficult to. You have to make a conscious effort to decide what you want to study, how you want to study. Otherwise, it becomes this big mess. So you have to be conscious. What is it about post-war history we want to understand? What things can we leave out to make a meaningful account? What things must we put in? Depends on what you want to answer. You have to have a question, clear question. Okay? Answers about, or narratives, stories, or the pictures you want to draw about Japan, post-war Japan, really depends on the question you're trying to answer. And of course, available data. And we had a nice picture of lots of messy white noise data, no order, but it's not there, so you can imagine. Social systems full of noise. You have to take out the noise, unnecessary data, and then make a picture out of it. Okay, some historical political economy questions we can ask about Japan. Why has Japan's economy boomed and stagnated? It's a very big topic. Japan, after the war, was devastated. Economy was really, and industry was destroyed so much by the war. And in a matter of 20, 30 years, it became, 20, 30 years was recovering, there was an economic miracle, and by the 1980s, Japan was, the second largest economy in the world. And then from 1990s, economy started shrinking, GDP growth was, zero, above zero, even minus. Stagnation, competitiveness of Japanese corporations have come down. Buying power, GDP per capita has shrunk, stagnated to some extent. Still, Japan is the world's third largest economy. But when people talk about Japanese economy, at least until the last 3 or 4 years ago, globally it was very negative. Japan is, a lost case, basket case. It's just shrinking. It's not efficient. It's not competitive. And of course, this big question of the demography. Population is shrinking, so economic power is shrinking. Why? What happened? Very closely related is the demographic issue, which is probably the biggest challenge to Japan today. Why has Japan's population exploded in the post-war period and then shrunk? And there are all kinds of political economy elements to this: political decisions, political factors, and also economic factors all intertwined. Returning to this question about democratization, Japan certainly became a democracy in terms of having free and fair elections, having some degree of choice of opposing parties, regular elections, rule of law, freedom of speech. All those things were, not perfect, but compared to a lot of countries, established in the post-war constitution. But one party continued to win. So at least until 2009, in which the opposition party won, there were a lot of questions about Japan's democracy being incomplete. Democracy only works when you have an exchange of power, or they would say. The argument was democracy is based on the fact that there's an exchange of power, peaceful exchange of power, through elections of the ruling elite. Whereas in Japan, it seems the LDP and, of course, the bureaucracy have dominated throughout the system. So how democratic is it? And why? What's the political economy reasons for this? Why has it... Go on. Go sit down. I'm going to close it because people are coming in. Let's try and not be late. It's not very professional. Well, you guys are not professional, but you will soon be professional. Very basic thing, not really. Okay. Why the Japan-US alliance has changed over time. I don't do so much foreign policy discussion here, unfortunately, and I understand foreign students want to take classes on Japan's foreign policy and international relations, and there isn't a course in English at Kyodai. I think they should make that. But I'm not an IR specialist. I don't really study foreign policy. I do domestic politics. But it's a question that emerges, and Japan's connections with the world, and in particular with the U.S. and with its Asian neighbors. How has that changed over time? Why has it seemed to continue and persevere, although there has been moments of tension? Tensions with the rest of Asia, we'll talk a little bit about that. Not much. Why is inequality? This is a big theme, along with demographic change in Japan. And it's one of the biggest challenges all over the world, I would say, along with climate change, demographic challenges, environmental challenges, is this explosion, surge of inequality. Economic inequality, inequality of opportunity, inequality of access to things, inequality between cities and rural areas, inequalities of all sorts, education access, and not just, developing countries, democracies and non-democracies. But for democracies, it's a particular challenge, because democracies is based on the idea that everybody has equal say and should be equal politically. And is it possible to maintain political equality when you have surging economic and socio-cultural inequality? And in Japan used to be seen as one of the most equal countries, middle-class society. So-chu-ryu shakai. This is a fiction to some degree. It's not quite true. There was always inequalities in Japan with the wealthy class and the capital, and those with capital and assets. But relatively speaking, compared to a lot of other countries, the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of inequality, has been very low. And it still is comparatively low. But since about the 1990s, it's gone up, along with many countries. Piketty talks about it too, inequality. And we're seeing it in terms of job opportunities, in terms of education opportunities, life chances, all these things. And it's a serious, serious issue. And this will be discussed. Okay, so why? Why is this happening? Political economy question. What are driving these political and economic changes over time? Over time means historically. Okay? So these kind of things we'll try and answer in this class. If you're not interested in any of them, or most of them, you should not be in this class. If you just want to get an easy credit, you should not be in this class. I want you to be intellectually curious. Okay? Okay, course objectives, understand the evolution of Japan's political economy in the post-war period. Think about history, think historically. What does it mean to think historically and think about history? I'm not a historian. I've always had憧れto be a historian. What is a desire to be a historian? I ended up doing political science area studies. But what is history? We'll do a little discussion later in this class. Think about the relationship between politics and economy. How do they interact? Which affects which? What happens when one changes in the other? These kind of dynamics. And to improve your English. Apparently, Kyodai, my Kyodai masters want me to teach you English, so improve your English. But this is not an English class. Okay, how is it in comprehension? Am I speaking too quickly? Raise your hand. Okay, very honest. Am I speaking too slowly? You understand everything I'm saying, but it's really boring. Raise your hand. Okay, comprehension. Okay, so today, the rest of the class, I'll do a little bit of this discussion. You can ask any questions anytime. This isn't going to be such a structured lecture. I might quiz you on this a little. I already sort of talked about course schedule and requirements, but I'll recap for those of you who have come late. Okay, any questions thus far? In Japanese, you can ask too. Okay, it seems there are more than 40 people. 16. I hope I have enough handouts today. Another thing, take notes if you like, but do not use your PC. Thank you. Or your Mac. Or your smartphone. Or your Galaxy, whatever. No electronic devices, please. Why? Well, it's not professional. In a meeting, when people are talking, you listen. If it's boring, please leave. I don't care. But don't stay thinking it's boring and do something else. Waste of your time, waste of my time. And disrespect for the rest of the class. Okay? So very simple. I know there's a lot in English, so if you want to, you don't have to worry. If you miss what I say, I'm going to give you lecture notes because I'm such a nice guy. I will give you notes of the lecture, 2 pages. Okay? Or 2 or 3 pages. Every lecture. So you can read that, study that. But don't think you don't have to come to class. Don't think, oh, I'm just going to read these notes and then I'm going to use them for my essay and then I'm going to get my passing grade. Because I may say things that are not in the lecture notes. And whatever. Hearing me speak about it and then reading it and then reading it in the book gives you different perspectives on things. Right? So that's that. So I will upload the notes on Kulasis. Right now I can't upload anything because the registration is not finished. Today I have printed it out. But if there's not enough pieces of paper to go around, just wait until Kulasis and you can download it from Kulasis, okay? I don't want to print every week because it's a waste of paper. Wait. Big question. What is history? It's a nice title for a book. It is actually a very good book. By H. Carr, historian. What is history? Oh, here we go. Greek. Maybe you put Greek inside your lecture. It sounds like the professor knows something. Sounds very... Anyway, historia. I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't know Greek. I've done Latin. Anybody speak Greek? No? Knowledge means knowledge acquired by investigation, narration of what has been learned. It's a narration, a story of what has been learned about the past. And it's done by investigation. So you can't just think up history. That's myth if you just imagine things. You have to have investigated. You have to have some empirical base. Empirical means to show. You have to have some data, and then you make a story. Studying past events and creating a narrative to understand how things happen and why they happen. And also what. Very important when you think about things, the difference between what happened, how they happen, mechanism, and why. What and how are kind of similar. It's a description of what has occurred. Whereas why is a cause and effect. Historians tend to shy away from saying, oh, we do causal effect. But they're always doing causal effect, actually. Because they're trying to explain events in sequence. And connecting the sequence suggests that this came, and as a result, this came, and as a result, this came. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but the idea is to understand and describe what happened and then explain why. By having a theory, by connecting these different disparate parts. There's always a debate, is history a humanities or is it a social science? I don't know, I think it's a kind of silly debate. Political science too. People say, oh, it's not really a science. What do you need for something to be scientific or science? Somebody. Anyway, who's a UK student? Who's a science student? Very good. Who's a medical student? Very good. Who's humanities or social sciences? Who does social sciences? Who does law? Very good. Who does history? No historians. I guess history is in Bungakubu, right? It's kind of very strange for me. Bungakubu is this faculty of literature. History is in literature. In the West, history tends to have a separate faculty. And then political science is in law, so we are kind of nowhere in between. Anyhow, what do you need for something to be a science, you scientists out there, or want to be scientists? What makes something scientific? Or what is scientific knowledge? Yes?
There's like a pattern or a law. It's like fuhenteki.
Huh? Yeah, what not it?
Fuhenteki.
Fuhenteki.
No,
Okay, it's universal. Okay, how is it? How is it universal?
Like
McDonald's and Starbucks and iPhone, they're universal.
like scientific laws, they're like same everywhere, no matter where you are or what time you live in.
Right?
So I think
What do scientific laws do? What can they help? How do they help? What's their power?
Can you repeat the question?
What's the power of a scientific law? What can you do if you know a scientific law? Yeah.
So you can test it anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
and you will get the same result.
You get the same results, which means that you know ahead of time what will happen. You can predict, right? An effective scientific law is that under the same conditions, under these conditions, if you do A, you'll get B. If you combine A and B, you'll get C. Anywhere in the world, anywhere, universally, under set conditions. You have to fix the conditions. Can you do this in social phenomena, social world? Can you get the same thing? Who says yes? That is, can you predict in the social world? Who thinks you can predict in social phenomena? Predict. Nobody. So why are we studying this? What's the point? It has no power. Just by studying it doesn't allow you to predict anything, right? You can't use it. Well, that's the thing that a lot of social scientists and historians have to think of. Historians, they've sort of given up, have to think about. But it's different from sciences because you cannot predict, you cannot test, you cannot experiment, you cannot make a controlled environment. You can't have a situation, let's say, what was the effect of Hitler on the world? You can't have 10 worlds, right? 10, all the same worlds. And then in one world you put Hitler in, and then the 9 other worlds, or 5 worlds you put Hitler in, 5 other worlds you have no Hitler. And then you run the time, and then you see the effects. That will be a real scientific experiment. You control everything. Only thing that's different is in one world, Hitler was accepted into the Viennese art school. He wanted to become an artist. He wanted to be a painter. He was rejected. He got pissed off. In the other world, it's the same as we know it. So by changing conditions and then experimenting, it's kind of observation. You change variables. But no, the real world isn't like that. There's only one world we know of, or that we can observe. So it's very difficult to make comparisons and to pinpoint what variable or what factor, what event caused what. That's a challenge. Yet, there are a lot of parallels and similarities over time. You can compare countries, you can compare situations, and you try to make an argument based on fact, based on observation, that these patterns exist, historical patterns. Democracy emerges in countries where there's a middle class, where the wealth is expanding, where there's rule of law, and you've seen this in 20 out of 25 democracies. So maybe it's a general law that if you have a middle class and the GDP per capita is over $6,000 US, you'll have democracy, or democracy will survive. If you have GDP under $4,000, then very risky. Because those kind of laws, or how should I say, general predictors. But it's not as precise a prediction as chemistry or physics. That said, in natural sciences, you have very non-predictive natural sciences. The study of dinosaurs, for example, or weather. We don't get really precise predictions. You can't get a general trend. I mean, weather reports say it will rain about 60%, 80% over this general area. It doesn't tell you if I'm standing in Hergumanben at 3 in the afternoon tomorrow what the weather is. Maybe it's 70-80% accuracy, but still not that percent. So there are different degrees of precision in terms of prediction. Okay. Not only that, there's a lot of disagreement over what actually happened. The facts are not quite clear. Or why it happened. And of course, there's moral questions which historians should avoid, or we should avoid. Were these good actions or bad actions? This is a good historical decision or bad decision. Shouldn't worry about too much, but there's a lot of disagreement. There's also a common claim: history is written by winners, or that history is an agreed set of lies. So we can think about that. That is, a lot of the people who complain about standard history they say that it's not the whole truth or it's not the truth at all. It's just a set of lies or set of facts selected and continued and advertised, recounted by those who won, those who survived. Is that true? Well, I'm not quite sure it's 100% true. They can think about it. Is there any objective history? That's the question. What makes a historical account objective as opposed to subjective? E.H. Carr in his book says facts speak for themselves. Well, this is untrue. People say that, oh, all you need to do is look at the facts. Go to the facts. Well, what are the facts? There's so many facts. There's so much data. There's so much noise out there. First of all, you have to select them. That in itself is a process that shows only part of the picture. And the facts themselves, depending on how you measure or how you argue or whose account you listen to, it's that are shown on situation, depending on who you ask, it's all different. So you have to have a very cautious and you have to be very careful of which facts we're going to point to. Okay? Facts speak only when the historians call on them. Exactly. There's lots of data out there, lots of information. They only come alive and start to work when you take them out of the mess, out of the noise, and start building with them. So historical facts do not exist objectively or independent of the information of the historian, the same kind of idea. We all know this. Even my daughter knows this. She's only 6 years old. The selective use of facts, I don't have a very good example, but she doesn't say the whole story. She wants you to see it in a certain way. Journalists, politicians, bureaucrats, they all know that the best way to influence somebody's opinion or understanding is selecting certain facts and omitting others. It's always done. There's no completely unbiased whole account of anything. You can't. There's too much out there. So you just have to be aware of that. Okay. Historical interpretation, many facts, many ways to interpret them, but all historical facts are important, same thing. But at the same time, just because there are many ways of interpreting them, not all of the interpretations of history are accurate or acceptable. Not accurate, but acceptable. There's some basic rules we should follow, and these are complicated, but one has to always have some evidence or data. These could be contested, but you have to be able to provide it. And if there is another set of evidence or data, stronger, it's another difficult concept. What's stronger evidence in history? If there's an agreement among the public or the readership or the professional historians, this is stronger evidence, then this historical fact or interpretation becomes stronger. It's not absolute. That's what you have to remember. Okay, historian will get the kind of facts, we're talking more about historians, get the kind of facts he wants. He's effective on what kind of argument he just makes, same idea. Historian is also affected by the period in which he or she is writing. His story of post-war Japan written today and probably 5 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, very different. Why? Because the historian is affected by ideas of the time, concerns of the time, okay? Developments that have changed. Right? If it's too close to you, you might not be able to see things. If you're writing about the 2011 earthquake now, and you write about it 50 years from now, I think that counts with it, obviously. Or one would think. Know the historian well, know the journalist, know the newspaper. Whenever you get information or arguments or stories, you should observe and understand the story and the facts and analyze them as you get them. But at the same time, you should think about who is it that's writing and why. What's their agenda? Where do they get their information? What's their training? Okay? It makes you more critical. I think you do that at some level, at some basis, but you should try and improve that. Maybe in this class we can acquire a little bit of that. Okay. It's not so important, but you shouldn't say, oh, what the Japanese did. It's not so important in this class to argue whether a historical event was a bad thing or what the people did at that time was morally bad. Okay? This is not a place to discuss or argue whether, the actions of the Japanese military in pre-war Japan were bad, or whether, the U.S. and Vietnam were bad, or I don't know what Trump is doing is bad. I mean, it's not important whether it's bad or good. What we want to know is what happened and why. Okay? if our desire to condemn and judge morally comes before trying to explain, then we've lost the game. There's space for that. Of course, we have to have moral discussions and morally making moral claims about events, but not in a class of history, not in a class of social science. So we'll try and avoid getting into a discussion of whether something's good or bad. Okay, so that's the part about history. If you're interested about these kind of things, it was very quick. E.H. Carr is a very classic book you can read. It's in the notes. What is history? It's a short book. It's in Japanese too. You can read as a start. Okay, so what drives history? What does it mean to drive in this context? Somewhere. What drives it?
Shape.
Shape, yeah. Or what pushes, what shapes, what causes things to happen in history. Okay? Give me some answers. What drives history? Give me some suggestions. What shapes history? No?
Conflict.
Conflicts, okay. Yeah. One conflict happens and this changes. One could also say that history is just a series of conflicts over and over and over. Marxian kind of view of good conflicts. What else? Yes, sir.
Development.
Development is history, no? Development is actual things happening. Whereas, well, economic development. Yeah, economic development could affect relations, could affect all kinds of things. Can you pinpoint more specific categories of things or people or anybody else? No? You have the same people raising their hands. Same people raising their hands. No? Okay. Well, yes.
I would like to say either way. It's a general thing, but it might be big events or it might be the accumulation of small events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another way of putting it. Big events, accumulation of small events. That's sort of classifying, grouping historical events into big or small. Each event in history has an outcome or effect, right? And some of them could be big, some of them could be small. Yeah, it's very, think about it, almost everything pushes history. That's what's so tricky about this, right? Anything. Traditional, I don't know, arguments or theories or oftentimes referred to causes can fall into maybe these kind of 6 categories. This is not an absolute, but 143, good. Individuals push or drive history. Social groups push or drive history. Institutions and structures shape and create, drive events. Ideas, very important. We should pay more attention to ideas that don't have any physical reality, but they have massive impact on physical reality. Natural forces shape and push it. And events, not big, not small, random. Unexpected, random. At the same time, well, what's random? I mean, everything is kind of random in a sense. It's only when we start ordering and saying this is connected that it's no longer a random event. But what so-called random events that one expects not to have it, particular impact, unexpected impact. Okay, so let's go through these a little bit quickly. And these are all things that will appear in your readings and in our discussions about post-war Japanese history, global history, global economy history. Here I had a nice picture of Napoleon, but it's not there. So you can think about Napoleon, okay? French emperor of the Japanese dream. History of the world is nothing but the biography of great men. For example, World War II happened only because of Hitler and Mussolini and Tojo. I don't know, some people say Emperor Showa, I don't know. That's one very simplistic argument. You wouldn't have had World War II without Hitler. Maybe, maybe not. It's hard, right? You can't test it. Japan's success stability and peace. Economic growth, mostly due to Yoshida Shigeru and his decisions and his vision for Japan. I don't think many people say that, but a lot of arguments or a lot of focus on one man. Will we have a different Japan without Yoshida Shigeru? Probably. But very different? I'm not sure. The 90s, you had all this deregulation, privatization, reduced taxes on companies, more kendodo, so dispatch worker, change labor regulations. It's all because of Koizumi, Junichiro, and Takedaga Heizo. These are two important political elites, Prime Minister of Japan, and the Minister of Trade, I guess, who passed a lot of laws, changed things. Is that why Japan is the way it is in terms of inequality today? Some argue that these are the main culprits, these two individuals. I don't know. Syrian war is caused just by, Putin and Assad and I don't know, a number of leaders. Very simplistic. It's not quite so easy. All this terrorism by Islamic fundamentalists, it's all because of what's that guy called? Bin Laden. We're going to talk about Bin Laden for a long time. It's not that simple, right? There's all sorts of other factors involved. Well, that's the great man theory. Not to say that these guys are great men, just big men, usually men, unfortunately. Society creates great men. Great men don't come out of nowhere. They're influenced. Before a great man can make society must make him. You have to remember. That's sort of stepping one historical chain of action before. One history is a chain of all kinds of factors influencing each other. If you step behind or sort of go back a little bit, there's a reason why there's certain people appear in certain periods. No man is an island, great leaders and historical periods need to be understood in the context of society. Social groups. Not just focusing on individuals, but focusing on groups of people. So what? Like middle class, farmers, unemployed young people, feminists, environmentalists, immigrants. I don't know, whatever group of people you want to think about. Religious group of people, Democrats, Republicans. These are the forces that shape political change, economic change. Okay? Democratic societies, you have voters. In non-democratic societies, you have masses of people. They can't vote, but they still have an impact on how the regime moves or how politics emerge, how economies change. Pretty obvious. Institutions and structures. This is more in terms of political science. But institutions are the rules, which, both formal and informal, which constrain and shape the behavior of individuals and the incentives and the disincentives of individuals to act in certain ways. What are institutions? Well, Constitution, Japan's Constitution, Japan's electoral system, labor regulations, tax policies, welfare regulations, welfare rules. All of these shape and determine how people behave, how people vote, how people act, how people do business, how people work. And that drives and that creates a momentum for historical change. Institutions. More broadly, social and economic conditions, structures can shape behavior of individuals and groups. This becomes kind of chicken and egg. This is an outcome as well as the cause. In history, the independent variable and the dependent variable mixed in with each other. Right? This is one part of a bigger process. Economic growth, change of industrial structure, change of, technologies for communication, IT, ICT, all of these things have great impact on how societies exist, interact, how economies function. And that has another effect. Demographic change can be counted in these. Major cause of change. And the population gets bigger, gets smaller, rapidly or gradually. Ideas. We talk about this. Impact of ideas and knowledge is hard to measure, but very significant for historical change. Ideas can include things like technological ideas. Right? These are ideas that form into physical technologies. Scientific knowledge, normative ideas like the idea of liberalism or the idea of democracy, idea of human rights. This has changed the way people and states behave. Without them, certain things would not have happened. Okay? Ideas in Japan have changed. Popular ideas, ideas that have been discounted. Ideas about equality, ideas about inequality, ideas about how we should behave towards other states, ideas about war, for example, Japan is very important. Pacifist ideas. This has affected Japan's course in the Cold War. Natural forces, very big in Japan. Earthquakes. Think about the impact of earthquakes on history. Climate change, disease. There's a lot of studies about the history of disease, certain disease, how that plays out through a society, how it changes the economy, how it changes trade routes, how it changes everything. You can think about how did the earthquakes in 1920s, there was a big earthquake in 1995, 2011 obviously, how did that change Japan's political economy? And random events, as I said. One, it's also called the Cleopatra's nose theory. You know Cleopatra, Queen. The story is, Kusogo, Mark Antony, which is a Roman general, fell in love with Cleopatra because of her beauty and his infatuation with her. He fell in love with her beautiful nose. And so it resulted in Mark Antony standing on the side of Egypt and civil war, resulting in civil war in Rome. If Cleopatra was not so pretty, so pretty, maybe there was no civil war in Rome. It's all because of this nose. So that's Pascal, French philosopher, argued. It's random, right? How pretty Cleopatra is. But because it affected this big man, great man, like Mark Antony, the general, it had an effect. It's kind of random. One wouldn't expect this to happen. Do you buy this argument? Maybe. But we never know, because we cannot rerun history with Cleopatra having a very short nose, stubby nose. As I said, Hitler wanted to go into art school, but he was rejected. That's why we have this terrible situation, that we had this terrible history. Those silly professors at the Vienna Art School made a mess. But if he had gone into art school, he wouldn't have become a dictator and hadn't gone around making war in Europe. If the 3/11 earthquake did not hit Japan, maybe the DPJ, the Minshito, would still be in power. Or they would have been more successful. They would have been able to, they were in a mess already by 3/11, but maybe they would have survived a bit longer and improved also. Maybe the course of history would have completely changed. So, random events. You have to think about all these things. The bottom line is, there's multi-causality. Multiple elements, multiple variables result in change. One can't just pinpoint one and say this is the only thing that caused this. That's not very reasonable. Everything interdependent, interacting. That's the difficulty. But one has to try and pinpoint those variables or factors, events, forces, structures, institutions that seem to be more important than others. Right? Determining which causes are more important than others and which causes we can learn from. It's difficult, but you want to try. And some historical arguments seem to be more persuasive than others. And which makes something more persuasive, we'll discuss a bit more in the class, okay? Okay, why study history? Well, we're sort of getting a bit long. Any questions so far about the 6 potential categories for historical change? Okay? Are we understanding what I'm saying? Yes? Kind of? Not really? Getting boring already? Okay. Why study history? Study history for today, tomorrow. Those who cannot remember the past, condemned to repeat it. It's been said many times. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Well, I'm not sure this is 100% true. Maybe you remember it, but it happens anyway. But the chances are that you will act wiser if you know past events. Probably higher than not. Mark Twain says history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. What does rhyme mean? Japanese students, what's rhyme? Who listens to hip hop? Nobody listens to hip hop? No? You all listen to Beethoven and Bach? So like students? No hip hop? Okay. Listen to hip hop. Good. Rhyme. They're rhyming in hip hop, right? Not just rhyming. Inyofumu. Okay? Inyofumu. Do you understand? Inyofumu? It sounds similar. It's not exactly the same. There's elements that are similar to sound. History doesn't repeat itself. Obviously, it doesn't repeat itself. How can it repeat itself? Things are changing all the time. But it's similar, kind of. Historians cannot make specific predictions, but they can offer valid and useful general guides. This is according to Karl. I'm quoting Karloff because he's sort of like go-to guy when you talk about what is history. But I think there's some truth to that. Compared to somebody who knows zero history, or compared to a state, country, that totally ignores history, totally has its own official propaganda history, disregarding facts, being very selective of facts. That state or that person compared to somebody who actually has studied various facts, has studied all kinds of theories, has thought about the difficulties and the complications of history. I think that person who has studied history will probably make less mistakes, will be more thoughtful, will not go into a course of action that is disastrous. That's why we're very worried about Trump, among other things. His knowledge of history, his administration's appreciation for history, and some say Abe. He thinks historians are not really, or they don't pay attention to what historians have done or said, and this causes me concern. You cannot step into the same river twice. That's another thing you should remember. Events don't copy themselves, so don't think it's going to be exactly the same. The river is always changing, but maybe the flow or the direction, maybe there's similarities. Okay, must always be sensitive to the difference between past and present case. Okay, so that was quick. Okay, questions about that section? We're almost done, I think. What time is it? We have 30 minutes? Oh my God. See, it's been a long time since I lectured. It's about 2 months since I lectured. I'm used to speaking for 90 minutes at a go. What have we done so? What is political economy? Very simply, the study of interaction, the interaction of politics. What is politics? Well, it's the distribution and use of power in society. It's a question of who gets what and why. And who gets what, when, and why. It's a question of power. Who has power? How is power used? And what effect does power have? Power being the ability to get what you want, despite others not wanting it that way. And how power is distributed. That's politics. What's economics? Well, that's the study, or that's the process of production and exchange of goods and services in a marketplace. Production and exchange of goods and services in a marketplace. And they are highly interlinked. Politics shapes economy, and economy shapes politics. So we have to think of the interactions between this process and this process. How does changes in the economy change political outcomes? How does changes in politics affect economic outcomes? How do they correlate, co-react? And in what areas are they separate? I would argue that Model 4 doesn't really exist. You cannot have a world where politics has no influence. Politics covers everything. So does economics. You cannot separate them out. Alas. What sort of things do people study in political economy? Democratic transitions and stability. What economic conditions are necessary for democracy to emerge and to survive? Okay? What economic conditions lead to dictatorship and the continuation of autocracy? Economic development. What kind of political conditions do you need for economic growth? variations in market regimes. Why are markets different? Why are market regulations, market structures different across different states over time? Variation in welfare. Why do some states provide universal health care to their people? Why do some states don't? Why do some states not provide universal health care? Why do some states provide very generous unemployment insurance, like in France or in Sweden or Denmark? Why do some countries have very little unemployment insurance? Why do some countries provide free university education? Why do some countries charge $40,000 US per year for education, private education? These kinds. Economic and political inequality. Industrial relations will come up a lot in Japan in this class about the relationship between workers and owners of capital, that is, management, those who own and run companies, and those who are workers. And how does that change? It's the security of jobs, how they're paid, how they negotiate wages, wage and working conditions. How do some countries have a certain type of labor relationship, while other countries have others? And through studying Japan, and the changes in Japan, one understands a certain type of these things, and in comparison with other states. And this is kind of extra. Okay, these are sort of questions that are asked in political economy, and by studying Japan as a case, one can understand a little bit about political economy dynamics, and also how Japan compares to the rest of the world. The textbook I use tries to put Japan, not just looking at Japan work, but showing that Japan is not unique. It has unique elements, but there are similarities with other Western or developed nations. These are parallel. We've already sort of covered them in the questions we're going to ask. Some political economy issues in Japan, causes of Japan's democratization and stabilization, causes and effects of Japan's growth, causes and effects of Japan's recession, Japan's labor market, changing labor market conditions. More narrower, but equally important, is women in Japan. Women's role in the political economy, changing relations between men and women in Japan. Not culturally, but in terms of their labor, legal standing. Importance in citizen movement, demographics and aging, center and locality. This is my research area. The question of the relationship between urban areas and rural areas, the capital and the provinces, and how that's changed over time. Decentralization, centralization. I'll do a short lecture, one lecture on that, since that's my research area. Okay, any questions there? Lots of information, just for you to think about. Why study Japan's post-war era? Why do we want to study? So raise your hand. Why are you in this class? Seemed like an easy credit. Hijino sounds like a funny name, so you want to see what kind of person has a name like Hijino. Come on. Why are you in this class? I mean, even before you heard me speak. Come on. Don't you know why you want to take this class?
So I studied political science at my home university.
Okay.
So I wanted to study a more domestic, Japanese domestic politics. I was just interested.
Very good. That's one very good reason to have a understanding of a particular case in closer detail. Although I do teach political science introduction course that talks a lot about Japanese politics next term. So, anybody else? Yeah. Please.
I think Japan's post-war era is very crucial to understand today's Japan. Like there has been many periods, of course, like throughout history, decided to face Japan, but especially post-war era is very critical.
Sure.
So to get to know today's Japan,
Good.
and Japan's
You're just
political
interested in modern Japan.
understanding.
Good. How about the Japanese students? Why do you want to listen to my lecture? I mean, any reason is good. Is there some question you have? Well, think about it. It's like pulling teeth, asking questions. in the beginning, or actually throughout the term. Don't be shy. Here may be some reasons. From a non-Japanese perspective, at least from Asian countries, Japan has been seen as a model, a developmental model that is a country to copy and emulate in terms of becoming a developed nation. Okay? Well, Japan is one of the first, is the first non-Western country to industrialize and modernize and become a developed economy. So at least in the 80s, 90s, when Japan was very strong. Even today, Southeast Asian countries, African countries, I don't know, other Asian countries look to Japan as a model. How did they do it? How did they become so successful? And the reverse. Looking at Japan, why did it become so sluggish? Why recession for 20, 25 years? What can we do to avoid becoming Japan? After the Lehman shock, European Union, countries in the European Union, U.S. economy slowed down. There was a lot of debt, massive debts. Banking system was in crisis. They looked to Japan because Japan had a similar situation in the 90s and early 2000s of high debts, slow growth, stagflation, no growth, and deflation. And countries said, well, we should look at Japan. Japan is a Hanmen Kyoshi. We don't want to be like Japan. And also low birth rate. That's another thing that people look to Japan to study. Japan has demographic, is the fastest, most rapidly aging and demographically shrinking countries in the world. Okay? So countries want to see what the effect that has on society and economy. How to learn from Japan, either to avoid it or to learn kind of. Japan is pioneering nuclear crisis too. There have not been so many tragic, major nuclear accidents in the world, and Japan has had one of them, unfortunately. Countries looking to Japan to see how you deal with a massive, major nuclear crisis. Technically, but also socio-politically and economically, what impact that has. So you study Japan for these cases to learn for your own country's sake. And at the same time, Japan is very important on its own terms because it's still the third world largest economy. It has a lot of soft power, it has a lot of hard power, economic power, economic products and companies, still competitive, and has great impact. And in the region, Japan is vital stability of Asia. It's the most important ally of the United States, which is, of course, the hegemon, the great power of today, along with China. And so it's very important to understand global dynamics. Don't understand Japan. So that's why you might want to study Japan if you're not Japanese, and if you're Japanese. From a Japanese perspective, maybe you want to understand Japan today in more detail by looking at the post-war through political economy perspective. Why we are at the point we are today, and what can we do to change Japan, perhaps to improve Japan. And also as a counterpoint, to have another perspective, to understand, if you study history, you see that things haven't always been as they are today. That things could be different, or had been different. For example, the relationship between Japan and China and Korea, very poor now. There's a lot of tension. But historically, it hasn't been the case, right? Going back post-war, all the way, it's been very close relations. But even in 1970s or 60s, 80s, even early 90s, there wasn't so much historical tension over historical issues in Japan and China. So it's changed. And one can see why. How you could have a situation where Japan's relationship with Asia is positive, or it's not as hostile. Or, a lot of people stereotype Japan as being a country of very, very hardworking and studious and obedient and not complaining society and middle class everywhere. But it hasn't always been the case. Even in the post-war period, there was a lot of labor conflict, unions struggling, students protesting. I'll show you a picture of burning front gate of Seimon of Kyodai in the 1960s, where you see students rioting and burning. So I'm sure you're aware, but things have dramatically changed. Students were not so politically passive in the past as they are today, or as they're seen to be today. So all of things you can see as a counterpoint. Things were different. Why were they different? It's also important, but studying history, maybe you can find solutions to today's problems. Deflation and slow growth is a problem today. Japan in the 1930s, early 30s had a similar kind of deflation situation. How did they get out of it? Tensions with China. When did Japan have good relations with China, South Korea? What caused them? How can we maybe copy or do things differently today? But just looking at Japan is not enough in terms of finding solutions. Demographic problem. Aging and low birth rate. What to do? Everybody wants the solution. Just looking at Japan's history won't provide all the answers. You have to look abroad. You can look at France, for example. France has had this problem of low birth rate, aging, but they managed to improve birth rate considerably. So you have to have not just a one country chronological perspective, but one should have a cross-country perspective. But in this class, of course, we focus on Japan. Just so you're aware, obviously, you shouldn't just look at Japan for solutions to today's problems. Okay, so that's that. So I don't know why you're in this class as of yet, but these may be reasons why you want to take this class. Okay? And if you don't find any good reason to be in this class apart from the fact that it's at 1 o'clock on Wednesday and you get a credit, I don't require you to stay. So you don't have to stay here. Okay. Course schedule and requirements, we already talked about this. Class is organized in 3 parts. We'll have 14 lectures, 5 classes on the post-war history until 1989. So, I'm reading from this textbook. Excuse me. Andrew Gordon, Modern History of Japan. It's in the notes that I'll give you. You can buy it. It's expensive. It's 5,000 yen. Or you can go to Yoshida Minami Library and you can read it at the counter. You can't loan it, but it's on reserve, the counter. Okay? So you can copy the chapter. We're only going to use chapter 13 to chapter 19, 17. So we only use about 1/3 or half of the book. It's a very good book. It goes from Tokugawa, so 1600 to about 2013. Excellent. Harvard scholar, excellent. And very accessible. Maybe the language is a bit difficult, but not so difficult. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can go to Yoshida Minami and borrow it. Okay? This is important. And we'll start using it next week. And that will cover the 5 classes and 4 classes. We'll read from that. We'll also do a second section on the more recent period. This should be 2017, sorry, 2015. This is an old slide. Looking at the lost decades. We'll talk about different things that happened then. And then in the last 3 or 4 classes, I'll do some specific topics. I don't know. Previous years, we talked about inequality, recent growth in inequality, divides between cleavages between different groups in society. We talked about nationalism. Is Japan becoming more right-wing? Is it becoming more nationalist? And then we talked a little bit about global role of Japan. So I might change the topic. I usually change a little bit, but 3 classes like that. Okay? So that's the book, Modern History of Japan. It doesn't have to be the 3rd edition. There are newer editions that are cheaper. Just any copy of this. Zoku Library, I think it's Yoshida Minami. Sorry. Just look at Kurine, the library website, and you'll find it. I think it's Yoshida Minami. There should be 3 copies that you can look at in the library on photocopy. Okay, I already said this in the beginning. Evaluation is pop quizzes, 30%, final term paper, 70%, 2,000 words English. Since the final term paper is 70% of the grade, you have to do a good job. Otherwise, you'll fail. And you have to show that you've read the readings. You have to show that you thought about the ideas. You have to show that you were in the lecture. So it's a bit of a challenge, but I will give you instructions. It's the end of the term in July. Okay? So that's it. If you need to contact me, you can email me. I don't have any office hours. So you can email me whenever, and then we can set up a date. We can talk. Good. So we have 15 minutes. I'll hand this out. Now, as I said, there might not be enough copies for everybody. If you don't get a copy, if you really need it, you can email me and I can send you a digital copy. Otherwise, just wait until Classes is uploaded. I'll upload it. There's 3 pages. So take the first 2. There's 2. Double side, one side. 1, 2, 3. Okay? I haven't stapled it, but. Yep. That's the notes and then the class requirements. Okay, in the meantime, does anybody have any questions? You can ask in Japanese or English. No? Yes?
So do we have anything for next week?
Yeah, we do. Assignment for next week, good. Please read the preface and the chapter 13 of the modern history of Japan. It may be difficult for you to get a copy, or maybe at the counter you can't find it. I'm not going to expect you to have finished reading it by next week, but certainly catch up by 2 weeks from now. Start reading this previous 2 sections. Okay? It should be written on your notes. If you don't get notes, write this down. Also, if you want, you can watch this video. There's a big kind of focus that there's a lot of historical footage, documentation on the Pacific Century. And watch video 5. Reinventing Japan. That's extra. You don't have to. It's nice to do. Okay. Do we have, how many notes do we have left? There's no more notes there? What to? 足りてますか？足りてそうだね。60枚。Yeah. Perfect. Don't take 6 copies. Okay. Who has extra? Don't take extra. Okay. Any questions? So usually, I don't know, 10%, 20%, 30%, they drop the class. It's okay. If you think this is not for me, if you think it's maybe too challenging, or if you think it's too boring, whatever, it's fine. But if you do, and I do hope that you do continue with the class, make sure you do try and attend the lectures. I don't take attendance, but it's important that you come. It's a bit of a shame if you don't stay the course and then you don't come. And try and ask questions. I know it's difficult with English, but it's good to challenge yourself. If you want to ask me questions individually, I'm here. Okay? Do you understand what I said? If you have any questions, I'm here. You can come and ask me. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. I think it's 10 minutes, but that's fine. So see you next week.